다 두군데 마찬가지로 정말 내 지금 나는 상황 프레시들이 쉬고요스 향수 이제 토부터 가고 싶다 좀.
First, I would like to welcome you all, and all who have come here. In Tibetan, the term is Teshle, which means welcome and greetings, and I can also mean congratulations. I'm happy to meet you here this evening.
개침부 가르 슈비나 말한소 단대 시리니 샤조 시리단 노조 시리 닌좀 대비 서비스 찬로요리 제빈자 딩이 파소 도르네 지금 도르네 삼자한테 개침시다래샤스.
So this evening, in fact, two cultures are meeting together, and it's very interesting and worthwhile, I believe, that there should be this kind of contact and exchange between two cultures, Western and Tibetan.
동네 면접 상만 찍으래. 제빈사 디 용을 제발라 파수 주두제 찍 삼을 찍 하고 지규도 개침부리시았어.
Why do I think this kind of event an exchange is useful and important? Well, it's gives us an opportunity to come to exchange views, and because basically all of us share the same aspiration to happiness, and we all also want to be able to avoid any problems, any difficulties as much as we can, and this is common to all of us, but we may have different ideas about how to go about achieving these goals. And this can be a kind of an exchange and a learning experience for us.
샤유비인자 대수 파수 주두제 낭배 공부시단데 리지리스 니키란줄디 슈그리스 디만도 양티 타직도 템버레 딘낭 신낭고르사 깨지시기요 말레스.
So the two cultures that are meeting tonight are the Buddhist culture of the East, and especially that of Tibet.
C'est une question de sono, je crois.
Il n'entend rien.
Ah mince.
Est-ce que c'est mieux là? On va essayer de faire quelques réglages alors. Est-ce que c'est mieux? Il faut que je rapproche au maximum. C'est mieux comme ça? Ah voilà.
Okay, can the English people hear? Yes, okay. So the Rinpoche is, of course, a representative of the Buddhist culture, and of course, most of you are from the West, and you have your Western views. But of course, because of this universal aspiration to happiness and to avoidance of suffering, everyone proposes different solutions and ways to achieve those results. And what I'm going to talk to you properly tonight is what the Buddhist views are concerning means to achieve happiness and avoid problems. But of course, I'm not in any way suggesting that this is the only view and the only correct view. That is not my belief at all. I just want for you to know what Buddhism offers in this sense, and it's up to you afterwards to choose what you like to think about it. So I think the best way to proceed would be to speak to you for a little while, and then after give you the opportunity to speak as well and to ask questions. I could do my best to answer them and give your point of view as well. And I don't think it's good for one person to monopolize the microphone. It'd be much more worthwhile. There should be an exchange. The topic of this evening's lecture is non-violence towards oneself or towards others. And it's an important topic because, as I explained before, the wish for happiness is a universal one, be it whether amongst us, our fellow humans, or in lesser forms of life, animal life, and so on. All living beings, all forms of life, have a fundamental wish to be as happy and as well as possible, and certainly don't have the slightest wish to suffer. So it seems important to therefore perhaps explain to you the various methods that the Buddha himself taught to allow us to fulfill this double aspiration. So that's my intention, my plan, which is to explain to you what the essential methods that the Buddha taught to allow beings to be happy and to avoid suffering.
Se mettre le plus possible à l'abri de la souffrance et au contraire d'aller toujours vers plus de bonheur.
All religions propose methods to achieve happiness and to avoid suffering. But I think it might be worthwhile for you to explain to you a bit about what the Buddha had to say regarding this, what he taught by way of methods. In the various religions who are theists, in the sense who believe in a sole God who created the world, the main method to pursue happiness is to pray to God and to request the blessings, in other words, grace, to receive the grace from the God, the Creator. This is not something I need to explain to you. You probably know it, I'm sure, better than I do. Now, the Buddha broached the issue slightly differently. First of all, he taught that happiness, as well as suffering and problems, are results, the consequences, and therefore they arise from specific causes.
Cela découle toujours de tout un ensemble de causes et de conditions.
So, based on this premise, the next step is obviously to try and create the various causes and conditions which produce the results we're looking for, which is ever greater happiness, and on the other hand, to work on trying to avoid producing the various causes and conditions that, if produced, would create our problems and suffering now and in the future.
Dende yinbi insan, da dewa drupchik gyudun dungin sesi gyu nija, chinang gyugin nija di yoris. Chi gyugin yori, nangi gyugin yoris. Yori di chi gyugin le nangi gyugin di gecha yoris, shanjik sung yoris.
Another aspect of the question that the Buddha taught, which is that, of course, the factors of both happiness and problems, difficulties, sufferings, there are factors that are external to us, and those that are internal to us, are part of us.
Il apparaît également que finalement ce qui joue le rôle prépondérant, ce sont plutôt les causes et conditions qui sont internes à nous-mêmes.
The Buddha taught, therefore, of the two kinds of causes and conditions. The internal ones are of prime importance, and the implication of that is that we have to understand is that our experiences of joy and misery are the results of our ways of thinking, primarily.
Manju samlu rik chikil titu gyulrunga samlu rik chikdang yang samlu tongdang sene mindu pa tatang sene mindu dendri wongi titu gyulrunga yoris.
So we speak of our experiences of joy and misery depending on our mind. So this implies certain ways of seeing things on the one hand, and there's also certain reactions or responses to situations that we can have. Sometimes we might call emotions in some case. That can be either productive or destructive.
manzu misi atil, manzu lu da semchik jayani, dini toan misi atil, da hako tukuris.
Basically, of course, we are living beings, and what this means is that basically we are beings who have, on the one hand, a body, of course, but on the other hand, a mind. That's universal to all forms of life. Of course, the ways the mind functions, and the sense of ways of seeing things rather will vary from one person to person, but what is common to all of us is that we have a body on one hand and the other a mind.
안주다 디케 요마레 미상무 미모고 든둘리 다가리 샘들 릭 인자 숨이어레스 숨디 가르스나 만주 둥이 깨지기 귤롱이 리직제 대화 깨지기 귤롱이 리직제 야 디니 가야 귤마징이 지금 바람은 없지 리직제 샘릭 인자 숨이어레 나 상물 찍고
put aside our body for the time being, and now let's look at our minds. The mind we have, in other words, the thoughts that we have, the feelings we have, we classify basically into three categories. There are ways of thinking and feelings that are destructive in the sense that they produce unhappiness in us. That there's others that are useful in the sense that they produce happiness. And the third, of course, is a way of thinking or feeling that is neutral and therefore produce neutral results, neither happiness nor suffering.
말한수 기분만 기다 천디 봐도 내버대 내버 봐. 내 차리. 기부도 가르쳐 있는 내 차를 봐. 근데 마음 바로 요야죠. 봐. 무슨 디나. 마음 바로 요야. 대화도 동이 기부도 동이 가른 대비 있네. 말한수 라발이 요레스. 말한수랑 라발이 요르면 또 신달이 요 말수 송레스.
So since it is our different ways of thinking and views that produce the kinds of experiences, pleasant or unpleasant, that we undergo every moment of our existence. Well, as concerns what we've done up until now in the past, that's gone and over. We can't go back and change that. But what we can do is to, from now on, realize, first of all, that our future is in our hands, that it's up to us to do what to our choices. Our choices will determine the kind of future that awaits us, and depending on what the efforts we make on us, we can be greater, more happy, or the opposite. And this idea is something, is in a sense really wonderful, because it means we have a large freedom to determine our future.
기분 되기에는 기분 내버도 만족시기 기분도 대원 되기에는 내버도 만족 소통이 어려서 소통이 여기도 타치 버렸어.
As for all of you who are present here today, you've had many different experiences in your lives up until today, but what is past, and now that you have, therefore, nevertheless, various possibilities to live your life differently and determine. Function in a certain way as to find a greater happiness in your lives. We often have a tendency to ruminate the past and either be nostalgic about the good times we had in the past, or ruminate the things that didn't go so nicely, so well as we would have liked them to. But all that really is a real waste of time, because it is the past, and it's a real waste of time. since there's nothing we can do to change whatever happened in the past and it's over, gone, we should just put it aside and focus on our future.
Le passé, eh bien, laissons-le derrière. Et puis c'est tout.
다 이니직 빼샤야 소라고. 네 레근데 제벌 때는 알강인데 차이스야로. 네 레가 삼단단데 제벌 때는 말아 빼대원데 중스야로. 근데 빼샤는 삼단 제비 있는 리리스. 만도 없는지 심부터 껴도 transparent 말.
It all depends, though, to be more precise. If you can use your past experiences and analyze them to come to understand that certain kinds of behavior created problems for us, well, that will be, in other words, if we can learn from our past experiences, well, that was something beneficial. We know we'll have a better understanding of what to do and what to avoid doing. That is something usual, but just simple ruminating our past things or being nostalgic about the good times we had in the past, that's a waste of time. We'd be better off using our time otherwise. Why can we assert that we can determine our future? Well, it's for the simple reason that our future does depend on our mind, on our way of thinking, and our attitudes and reactions and so forth. Since these, and we can do something to improve these, therefore we can alter our future. Our future is not traced in advance.
Et c'est pour cela que nous avons une capacité d'action.
So we can say creating our own future in a constructive way. This is something that only we can do, and no one can do it for us. Of course, other people can help us, give us a helping hand, give us some pointers, give us some good advice. But the basic task is for us to accomplish.
À bien les réflexions nécessaires, eh bien, c'est soi-même, parce que personne d'autre ne pourra réfléchir à notre place.
So if we've behaved badly and we're experiencing the results of that bad behavior, nobody can come and drag you out of the mess you've created for yourself. No, that's something that's not possible, nor can they wash away your bad behavior. So on the one hand, we have the very great freedom to determine our future, our destiny, which is marvelous. But on the other hand, when we think about it, it's actually a huge personal responsibility. We are responsible for our future.
Ça nous met sur le dos une très grande responsabilité.
So, this is why the Buddha in a sutra, the Buddha stated that it's up to each person to be their proper guide, their proper protector, and if a person works on improving their mind, and then that person can achieve freedom from suffering, liberation.
야 지가 쇼레 때문에 계속 근데 촌에 요 말베스는 근데 매번 말스 물론 겹쳐오리 상계 물론 겹다 군주 술 물론 겹쳐오리 란을 하게 다 연된증 가서 상물이야 물론 겹쳐오리디 물론 겹zam기 레브드야 요 말에 내가 뭐니 나랑처럼 지고 요아레스
Does that mean, and some people believe this is the case in the Buddhism, there's no such thing as prayer, there's no such thing as making wishes, and you cannot ask for help from higher beings. That's, of course, a mistake. That this exists in Buddhism. You can make wishes and address your prayers to beings who are superior to in their development, spiritual development, and they can help you, but the main task has to be accomplished by you and you alone. No one else can do it for you. So what exactly, concretely speaking, practically speaking, are we supposed to do? We need to work on our mind in the sense of work on the elements of our mind which are causes, would be causes or will be causes for happiness, and need to reinforce these, generate new ones and so forth. And on the other hand, those destructive elements of our minds, that we need to try and halt them and reduce them and discourage them from arising in our mind.
Au contraire, les développer et faire en sorte qu'ils se manifestent toujours plus à long.
So what are some examples of the states of minds that are destructive and harmful to yourself and to others? There are things like anger. There's also jealousy, and pride, and also attachment, ignorance, and also doubt, and many others. And of course, the wish to harm others is a very negative thought that relates to the title of this lecture. Because why is this so important? It's because this kind of attitude of wish to harm others, of violence towards others, is extremely harmful to, first and foremost, to oneself, and of course to others, of course, that we harm as a result of our violence. To give an example, a basic example of anger, if we're sitting around quietly and then we think about something that prompts an attitude of anger in us, well, what happens? Well, of course, the person who suffers the most from it initially is us, the person who is angry. It is very upsetting, very disturbing to ourselves. We certainly don't feel happy when we are angry. As for the effects on others, well, it depends, but it's not sure that we will even know what we're angry.
langa novasil tigres.
The trouble is, of course, that when we yield to feelings like anger, where our minds are extremely agitated, and anything we do under the influence of such a state of agitation is most likely, almost guaranteed to be mistaken and harmful.
Rang lung lang yine, riba. Rang lung lang yine, rang jeda mandibul soba tinte lung lang yine, di nondu chin tsara di swaya yo man, dike peng marbas.
And if it can happen too that we get angry with ourselves, in the sense, oh, I did something that was awful. What purpose does that serve either? If we feel very upset with ourselves because we've made a big mistake, well, is that going to change the fact that we make the mistake? No, it doesn't really help.
Ça ne change rien à ce qui s'est passé avant, donc ça n'est pas une façon d'y remédier, et ça nous perturbe complètement.
It can be very harmful because in certain cases people are so upset with themselves that they actually take their own life.
신도가 섬들 삼다 갈래갈 삼당이나 눈르디 세토그링 만제 중어디 진중 눈르디 텐데 민중아 지토그레스.
So if when we realize we've done something that's very mistaken, very bad, if we feel very upset with ourselves, what does that do to change the situation? Not. It's a waste of time in the sense that the mistake has been made. Instead of getting all emotional and upset about it, we should be better to look at what we've done and try and analyze it, try and understand what led us to making that mistake, why we made it. If we can understand the mechanism through our reflections as to how we were led to make this mistake, then that can be useful. It can be helpful for us to preventing us from reproducing the same mistake.
저제비네리 깨지샤비네리 냠도 레게제비네 드니 깨지치다 즉 수부터야 저부터니 남주민다 완전 남주는 남주도 배라는 남주미 남주 이동원서 여봐 디벨라지 미도고 시우지 참로레스 딘들 때니 먼저 로컬력이 여래 사사이네리 레게지로이네리 부구이네리 파마이네리 상만 마대 차용 거레스.
The thing with anger, like we've seen, is that it does upset our mind, and if we continue to act under the influence of that anger, whether it's directed to ourselves or to someone else, say, for example, the anger directed towards ourselves, well, it puts us in a very, very uncomfortable position, and because we feel upset and irritated with ourselves, it could be happen very easily that we say things to others that we wouldn't have said otherwise, and moreover, our whole physical appearance even can change under the influence of this state of irritation, and which can mean that, and of course, will be visible to others when somebody usually has a pleasant appearance, but under the influence of this state of mind, they lose their pleasant appearance and become sort of introverted and frowning and so forth. And this can, of course, cause worry amongst for those around us, be it our friends, our family members, our partner, or whoever. So everyone will be suffer, therefore, from our state of mind.
출연적 이동원적 진미네 공부들이 랑도 고민도 잘로리 다 뒤뒤가 아주 비기 이동원이야 체도 괜찮다 그래 가르쳐비니 편 패야요만 스티 패야요만 룽 흉첨을 난다빈자 제부 간데 서비는 제부 뭐야요만디
It could be that we have a relatively attractive physical appearance, but when we get angry, all that is lost. And some people go to a lot of trouble to make sure that their appearance is attractive. They dress well and put on makeup and wear jewelry and so forth, and to please to appear pleasant, attractive to others. But if we, despite all this, we get angry, all that will have been a waste of time. So these are just some of the few of the drawbacks, the immediate drawbacks of anger. But in Buddhism, we see beyond this life and consider there are future lives that follow the present one. And those of you amongst you, some may believe in this or not, but there are consequences of our states of mind in our future lives as well.
자 공부 많은 남상 지켜갈 가보리 간주 길 공부 깨시기리 공부 깨시기리데 이니 공부 온도 땅네 말한서 가르슈리 공부 온 땅은 말한서 네가 매버버든지 지켜요 말했어.
So the consequences are immediate but also long-term. Although, no, it's all very well to take note of this and decide to no longer get angry. But it's not as easy as all that because we have certain habits, and we will even with the best of intentions, we probably will continue to get angry or feel irritated from. But we can nevertheless work on our anger, and especially try and avoid when we get angry to avoid acting based on anger, letting our anger take over our mind completely, so that we act in a negative way because of it. So when we get angry or take note of the fact that we are irritated or angry, the best thing to do is, instead of letting it take over and carrying on with it, feeding our anger, is to stop and try and ask ourselves, now, why am I angry? Instead of letting it just run us, dominate our mind, take over our mind, we need to stop and sort of observe that anger. Because if we don't try and control or check our anger and let it run, give it a free rein every time it happens, another great drawback of that is that we form a very bad habit, and which becomes more and more difficult to break, because with our tendency to get angry will become stronger and stronger.
Dini kongzhu wong tu danan gyuan dagin shubi gyuan mangbuzi duwa. Kongzhu wong tu matang yini kongzhu la gogab zhani. Kongzhu kyaa nubati shuk chero chini. Manzu sem gomdi gomni kongzhu kyaa dini long langbu shubu cha kakayi ni suya matuya chaya yoris.
So on the one hand, when we yield to anger, we've seen that this could have very negative consequences in terms of our behavior towards others. We hurt ourselves, we hurt others. But there's also the second very great disadvantage of it, which is that by yielding to our tendency to get angry, we reinforce our habit of getting angry, and it becomes more and more difficult to control it. So this is for these reasons we need to do our very best to try and control our anger when it begins to arise in our mind. So I've taken the very clear example of anger, but there, of course, the principles the same for the other destructive attitudes in us, such as jealousy. I mentioned earlier, but there's also attachment, and then, of course, there's ignorance, which you know about it. We all know that ignorance is also extremely harmful to us. I've mentioned the factor that is attachment. Attachment is something that we all have and feel regularly, steadily. But it'd be good to understand that it really serves no positive purpose. It's not useful in any way at all to us, because it's not because we feel attached to, for example, worldly goods that we're necessarily going to have more of them. If we're attached to money, doesn't mean we're going to necessarily have more and more money just because we're attached to them. And furthermore, when attachment is in one's mind, it also is upsetting. It disturbs our mind. So we can feel attached to things external to us, like our house, our car, and so forth. It doesn't mean because we're attached to our house that it's going to improve on its own, become more beautiful, and so on. And it's also true of our body. We're attached to our body, but being attached doesn't make it healthier, more beautiful, lasting longer, and so on either. That doesn't mean, though, that we shouldn't look after our body, our health. Of course, we should. We should behave in such a way as to maintain our health as well as we can, and not avoid doing anything that is going to harm our health. And then it depends on how we eat, sleep, and so forth. We need to look after our body, just like a parent, in a sense, looks after a little child, their child. Our body is something useful. We need to keep it as long as we can. Why is it important to look after our bodies? Well, if we can maintain ourselves in good health, that leaves the freedom to reflect well, and in ways that are positive, and then ways that allow us to increase our good karma and improve our ways of thinking, and so on.
파만 빈자 더 사사 소든데 여러분이 대술이 찍버리 대술 차고 깨그리 먼저 귤 깨그리 때 차고 공도 마당한 쟤네 개치슈드 가르스는 고란소를 펜베 탑시지 해야 먼저 파 개치슈드 콘솔 파 잠지 잠바다 자와제시 뒤치 오르면도 차바 쌈기 배야요 만스
Clearly, there are other objects of attachment, which are our loved ones, could be our family members, or could be our children, could be our spouse. These people are important to us, but being actually attached to them isn't particularly useful to them. What would be good for us is to feel concern for their welfare. In other words, to feel affection for them and love for them, the wish for their happiness. But attachment doesn't serve any purpose whatsoever. It doesn't help them, doesn't help us. The fact is that no matter how much we care for our loved ones, sooner or later we will be separated from them, we will lose them, they will die, and so this cannot be avoided, but being attached to them is going to make that separation all the more difficult. It will not carry any benefits. On the contrary, it will be very difficult and harmful for us when we lose them. On the other hand, loving them, caring for them, that's something beneficial for them and ourselves.
남ing 레로 세아인데 방보주하리 대수만술 시다베 동이기지 귤로고 요레스
There are other less obvious, perhaps, states of mind which are harmful as well. There's distraction, for example, also laziness, and these are, we not necessarily might see it as such, but they harm us as well.
시다 망부여르디 상무시문된 두준다기요 말 기란솔이 고 마대 차로리 벤 촉시 제수이랑 잠바 왔다 벤 데수데디 인지민지 간주 귤이야 빼고 하지리스
Now, looking at the positive side, there's many good states of mind, positive ones that are extremely useful to cultivate in us. There's many, but we could just mention a few. There is love. There's also the rejoicing in the good that others have and do. There's also the ability to content with what we have, contentment with what we have. And the more we can cultivate in us, in our mind, the more happy, the more well we will feel. And it will make it easier for us to avoid experiencing the negative, it will help prevent the negative factors from arising in us.
Le moindre désagrément, la moindre souffrance.
제비인자 미치기 배나 미 심지 현달배 동의기 나대버 주비이나 디 동일 전도 삼단 대월은 그거 쇼스 삼단이나 되게 먼저 심 줘야요 말이.
For example, when we observe someone who is suffering, who's facing serious problems, if we have a great feeling of, we can say, a wish for that not to be the case, that they should not suffer, that they may quickly escape or overcome from this situation, then this kind of attitude and wishes and prayers that we can make will be extremely beneficial to us.
쌤이 유인데 단다 쉬우대 상문 안줄 유다 요리 단다. 유다 요리 디 단다 안줄 유가 디베 시다베 가르슈리 춘중지리 베는 잠바키비 니리 닌지키비 니리 소소 가설 기그리면도 동해진 탐질 기기 말이 대외 풍대고 탐질디 잠발 기기 말이스.
So that is an example of that. This quality is compassion, and there are other qualities that we have to a certain degree, but the degree to which you have them will vary from person to person, of course. But for the most part, we can say that our capacity to feel compassion and love for others is rather restricted, rather limited, and also, for example, we can feel these more easily towards those who we are fond of, but certainly not for all suffering beings. That is not yet something. That's not a quality that we have yet already achieved. We have.
Connaître le bonheur, et cela, quel que soit cet être, sans exception.
다디파 갸치로 땅투비는 만주 쌤 고양을 조우리. 이니베 로자체를 조우리 야보여르스.
If we can expand, therefore, our qualities of compassion and love for others to so that they encompass all sentient beings, for example, well, that would certainly open us up, and we can say give us a very, very much greater happiness ourselves.
디능한수 쌤 사자다 망쳐 군수 심도리 디 심도 나란주 대화토용 그랬어.
So the more we encourage these kinds of thoughts and positive thoughts in us, the more they will grow, and they will sort of become a part of us. And so the more we have such kind of thoughts, the happier we ourselves will feel.
Et donc, nous serons de plus en plus tranquilles.
도스리 제빈자 다독스직제 다디디르바 가르슈리 동네의 대외 교를 롱했음 되긴 쉬어봐. 다 되긴 디쉬리 만주 파타당 삼동당 초니 야 만주 동이기 다 대외 용식을 쉬어레스.
So earlier I mentioned that there were sort of two categories of thoughts that we can have. There's good qualities of mind and bad ones, the ones we've just been talking about that have various effects on us, as we've seen. But there's also ways of seeing things, our views that can be more or less precise or exact. And these have an important effect on our well-being as well, and the ideal is that our views should be correspond as closely as possible to the way things actually exist. In other words, that we are as realistic as possible. So it's in the world we live in, and in our experience, we see many different kinds of situations. Some are good, some are bad. The important thing is for us to know what is a negative situation is a negative one, and as for a positive or helpful one, to see it as such as well. In this way, we will avoid many problems for ourselves and much lessen our disappointments, our frustrations. Right now, we all carry views that are really false, in the sense that we imagine certain things, behavior or whatever, will be useful to us when in fact they're not at all, and they can be extremely harmful. And on the other hand, there's other sort of forms of action and behavior that in fact would be very useful to us, but because they don't correspond to our way of seeing things, we put them aside and they don't see them as anything positive or useful to us. And of course, when we make this kind of mistakes, then the results are not necessarily the ones we're looking for, because we're sure that something's going to be useful to us when it's for sure it's not going to be. Well, we will, because of that mistaken appreciation of the situation, we will reproduce the behavior that is going to harm us in the end. We have many hopes and wishes, many desires, and this is normal. But as to whether our wishes and our desires are realistic or not, it's another matter. So when we have an aspiration, and first, before we pursue it, it would be good to ask ourselves whether it is realizable or not, whether it's something that I can actually achieve or not. Because often we hope to achieve something that is beyond our reach for the time being anyway, and putting a lot of effort into pursuing it can only end up in great disappointment. So if we take the time to analyze the situation before we go ahead, to check whether it's possible to actually realize our aspiration, and if we discover that we exaggerated our expectations, well, then we can rein ourselves, our hopes in, and in this way avoid a lot of disappointment, a lot of frustration.
Nous espérons toutes sortes de choses qui sont en fait impossibles à faire, et nous passons de déception en déception.
대위 귤 종의 셈 만수 귤 개버지 동의 귤 종의 셈 만수 바 뇽도 야 식지 드니 된세 숨부들 무비 내줄 바다단들 만노르스 고그스 슈르 봐 디숨자 나란 소란 거 저러면 또 미신다 수치 잠불이 미 상명 안 주된다 상당히 팬다고 말해.
So we've seen now what we've covered so far is that there are various things, ways to work on our destiny by improving our mind. We first by understanding which factors in our mind are harmful to us and work on lessening them. On the secondly, time to recognize what is beneficial to us and others in ours and cause of happiness, and work on encouraging, cultivating these. And thirdly, is the need to try and adjust our way of seeing things so that they correspond to the way things actually exist. They are as precise and accurate as possible. Now, these tasks there's no one that can do them for us, and even if everyone in the entire world hoped to and wished to accomplish these for us, they couldn't do it for us. It's only we that can do it.
다 된제 슈두야 민가시 벤로 토보들이 연구를 봐 밀로 토보 로켄 거든이 봐 대수선다 나지 도구마다 삼들이 땅 도구마를 삼베 삼 코스리스 된제 사운다미다들이 땅 도구마를 삼 코스리 디 템바 말이 인지미지 향수 투그리스.
When you hear this, there might be some of the older generation amongst you who think, well, I'm too old. How can I possibly do this? It's not possible. I don't believe this is true. There's still much you can accomplish. Oh, why is that? Because if you are old, you still, if your mental faculties are still intact and sense of you still are able to think and reflect, then there's lots you can do to improve your thinking, to improve your mind. Of course, if you really lose your mental faculties, it's another matter.
남는다 동고야다 동마고야다 하고고고 여봐 디제벌 삼루 릭딩 먼저 생나라 삼루 린 라민다 가서 이미디 희에나 야고시다 요르스.
But to be able to work on our minds in this way, to try and improve our ways of thinking and our responses and so forth, of course, we need to be able to correctly identify in our minds what is harmful and what is beneficial. That requires making a little effort to learn about the mind and the different elements in it. So to sum up what I've basically the basic thesis that I've presented now, that how things are explained in Buddhism, we're taught that the experiences we undergo, be they pleasant or unpleasant, are results, and they arise from causes and conditions. And the most important causes and conditions of these results are to be found within ourselves, in our mind, and to be able to shape our future, we need to work on our mind and to encourage the factors in us that are causes of happiness, and to reduce the elements that are harmful to us and create many problems for us. But of course, as I began to explain, it's to be able to work on this ourselves in this way. We have to be able to correctly identify what is in us and the nature of our various thoughts and feelings. Quite often, although our minds are filled with thoughts and feelings, we don't correctly identify them for what they are. If you don't make this effort, you can very easily imagine that, in fact, you're thinking well, correctly, when in fact you're completely off course. You've got it wrong. The way you're thinking is not correct and not helpful. In Buddhism, Buddhism has much to offer in terms of techniques to come to and information to understand the functioning of our mind. There are things found in Buddhism which are not found, for example, that even the sciences cannot offer us. So I believe if you are interested or drawn to Buddhism, I believe that within Buddhism, the most important aspect of Buddhism to pursue or to learn about would be the functioning of the mind. And the prime motivation in studying, learning about the mind as explained in Buddhism is to understand and improve our own mind, our not someone else's. If we can better understand how our mind functions, we will better come to know ourselves. Failing this, it happens quite often that we don't really know ourselves as well as we might think we do. It happens that in certain situations we find ourselves saying things or thinking things that surprise us, because we think, how did I come to say that? You know, where did that thought come from? And if we have that, if we are surprised by ourselves, that it's clearly because we don't know ourselves as well as we might think we do. And if we want to know ourselves better, it is our mind that we need to learn more about. So this effort to work on improving our mind is something that we all have the ability to accomplish. First of all, we are capable of doing it, and for that matter, it's nobody, as I said, can do it for us. That we mustn't have wrong ideas about that. So to put it in a nutshell, what I've been saying is simply that we need to encourage as much as possible all the positive thoughts in us, and discourage, reduce as much as possible all the negative thoughts of us that harm us. I would like to give you a few minutes, some time now to ask some questions. After which there's a few important attitudes, the word such as rejoicing, that I would like to expand upon. If you have any questions, feel free to ask them now.
J'ai quand même soulevé une grosse question, qu'en même temps je me lance.
How can we fight to reduce the rancor how can we overcome rancor? It's a very good question, Rinpoche says.
Excellente question.
Rancor is something that is extremely harmful to us.
Nous mine, enfin, c'est quelque chose qui nous est tout à fait préjudiciable.
It's really something we need to get rid of, expel from our minds. So first of all, the first thing to do is to ask ourselves what use is rancor? How does it help us? Does it improve our health? Does it make us happier? What purpose does it serve? Of course, it isn't helpful in any way whatsoever. Feeling bitter is not going to increase our wealth. It's not going to better our health, and certainly not going to improve our mind. So it's really, you need to use your mind, and which you perfectly are perfectly capable of doing. You need to try to remind yourself again and again of all the disadvantages, all the negative effects of bitterness, of rancor.
De manière, et de ce fait également, du coup, nous céderons de moins en moins facilement.
If you can do this repeatedly, it should help lessen your bitterness. The once or twice will not suffice. You have to repeatedly remind yourself of the negative effects of it. It's necessary to really repeatedly counteract this factor or any other negative mental factor, whatever it may be, because we have formed habits since the beginning of this time, since we've been turning in existence, the cycle of life over and over again. So these factors are in fact like our oldest friends, companions, we should say. Friends, maybe not the best word. They've been there with us since the beginning of this time, which is an extremely long period of time. So you can't get rid of them over the night. It really requires a certain amount of effort, an exercise of mind to break the habit.
Et lorsque la... Un, deux. Ah oui, excusez-moi. Et lorsque la rancune fait du bien.
Oh. When bitterness feels good, what about then? If it really and truly made you feel happier in your life, then it would be a different thing. But it may feel a little bit of good for the, in a short term, but I really don't think it's the case. It's if it truly brought about greater happiness in life, then okay, why not? But I doubt it seriously.
Bénéfique, à ce moment-là, il n'y a aucune raison de nous débarrasser de la rancune, on la garde.
And if it really made you happier, then keep it as long as you're long, and encourage it even. Any other questions?
Auriez-vous d'autres questions?
Oui, bonsoir. J'aurais voulu savoir
I would
quelle
like to know
attitude
what
avoir
attitude to take
face à une personne malhonnête
with somebody
qui
who's
vous fait
dishonest,
subir
who
des graves injustices,
inflicts, behaves
mis à
very
part le
unfairly
fait,
you,
je dirais,
and you,
le plan juridique, mais
even in legal
quand
terms.
on a une relation avec
When
cette
you have a
personne,
relationship
qu'on est
with
face
this
à elle,
person, and you're with that person,
quelle serait l'attitude à avoir?
what kind of attitude should we have? Towards that person? Now I can see you. So, if somebody harms you in a various way, even leads you to court, for example, well, and when we meet this person with whom we do have a relationship, what kind of attitude are we should to maintain towards that him or her? So the example is someone who is dishonest and it creates a lot of problems for us out of dishonesty. Now, in this situation, so people are trying to harm others at all times. That happens very currently, very often. But it's not because some people want to hurt us that they succeed. But so we need to first of all, perhaps ask ourselves why the person has tried to harm us or is harming us. Does the person, is it for a good reason or not? If there's no good reason they're doing it, and if they have succeeded, in fact, in harming us, then this is a case of someone has, among the many people who try to harm us, someone's actually managed to do so. And if that is the case, it doesn't come about by chance. It is because, of course, I'm answering you from a Buddhist point of view. If someone succeeds in harming us, it is because of a karma that you share. That the person succeeds in harming us is because we had the karma to be harmed. And
nous allons nous sentir blessés ou affectés. Maintenant, si nous nous sentons blessés, affectés, dans le bouddhisme, on va dire, il faudrait que nous nous demandions pourquoi quelqu'un peut avoir un tel impact sur nous. Comment se fait-il que l'agissement de quelqu'un d'autre puisse nous nuire de cette manière? Et là, selon le bouddhisme, il faudrait que nous questionnons un peu sur nos propres karmas. Dans l'analyse bouddhiste des choses, c'est que si quelqu'un peut avoir un tel impact sur nous, c'est en résultat de karma que nous-mêmes nous avons accumulé dans le passé.
So if we experience the harm on the hands of others, it is because we created the karma and behaved in a certain way in the past, which led to this present situation, and the karma has come to a state of maturity, which is, in other words, has borne its fruit, and in which case there isn't a lot we can do about it, but except understand the situation.
Est beaucoup plus le résultat de nos propres mauvais karmas antérieurs que des agissements de l'autre.
Que faire quand est-ce que
What are we to
une
do
émotion extrêmement forte
when a very
nous
strong
coupe
emotion
toute capacité de
so
réflexion
completely paralyzes us
et nous empêche
and
de faire face
and makes it very hard for us to overcome, get out of this state?
아, 거기도 il n'est peu que 아, 거기도
그런 가능성이 고마스 프랑스가
des
프랑스계 가서도
émotions yolwa émotions shukshembochi kyondu samsam tenengatsu nupat samacha samlo tomatuba tenedidu kaichtu gyonasa tenikari
제가 뜻인데 인자 에모션 슈크침부터인데 마요와 탑시지 오레스 이 가르치 오르시도 내주 야도 가리니 교전 상담 교전랑 상담 제비나 고마 시라더니 용구만았어 교전 편의 상담마당에서 다가서 스테비는 호프스칼 멤버 용도 남산 바로 용구리 다과 교전 상담 내가 가르치비니 교전을 용구리 딜 상담이나 에모션 용기를 때인데 슈크침부 용도 말했어.
So when we're overwhelmed with a certain emotion, he didn't give an example, but what are we to do? The thing is to try and avoid finding yourself in that kind of situation to start with, and by trying to understand how we function, what our tendencies are, and try and to control our minds as much as possible so that we are not so easily overwhelmed by such and such an emotion. It's when we're calm and in a favorable situation for reflection that we need to take the time to reflect and to analyze our mind and to understand ourselves, and so as to know what our tendencies are and be on our guard for this, so that when the emotion in question is beginning to arise in us, we can recognize it immediately and maybe control it.
Bonsoir, merci pour cette conférence.
디 차르바 디 차순 에모션 디간 상도 아날리시지 가르레 간데스 용도 코 유간데지 용도가 코모 간데지도가 에모션 신데 스타 셈게도가 가르슈르 로존 제비지는 심중나 가르레 심중 가르 세텐데 상당히 땐데 코 슈슈로르스
it might, the other thing to do is, of course, which might be that you can analyze the emotion after it has waned, faded away a bit, because sooner or later it will, of course, fade away. And then you have to ask us, why did I have this feeling? Where did it come from? What exactly is this emotion I was feeling? And to try and understand it better. And if you have taken the time to study more about the mind and mental factors, then you can use what you've learned to better identify what has happened to you, the emotion that's arisen, and so that you come to better understand yourself. And now, me, as a Tibetan Lama, I don't really understand this whole idea of emotion. I don't even know how to translate the word into Tibetan. It's a little bit beyond me.
Bonsoir, merci pour cette conférence. J'aurais une question à vous poser, c'est-à-dire que faire lorsqu'on n'est plus maître de notre esprit? On sait qu'il y a des choses qui nous font du bien et on ne les fait pas, ou automatiquement on a envie de faire des choses qui pourraient nous faire du bien et on fait le contraire. Et comment sortir de cette situation?
So the question is, when we don't have any control over our mind whatsoever, and we know perfectly well that a certain way of behaving is not going to be helpful, and yet we do it, and another that we should do is we don't do it.
Dini semngse kore rangshi kandisidwa. Digan ku tapu gyama tu chadu ku number yundu tu kandi chadu. Dendel samdan yang samdan lidore.
When we find ourselves in this kind of situation, it's we have to work on. We have to train our minds, and especially when we are in a calm mental state, we need to take the time to think and to understand. Like I said, to understand ourselves and know that we have such and such a tendency, and decide that when that tendency to make the wrong choice occurs, that to not let it happen, to generate a form of determination in us, to not yield to that tendency to do something we know perfectly well is going to be harmful to us. And this we need to, of course, not do just once or twice. It's a question of again, repeating the action when we're in a good frame of mind. We need to try and therefore understand to this. For this, we need to try and understand our tendencies, our habits, how our mind functions, and work on when we're not subject to one of these kinds of negative thoughts, to be aware that it will arise again, and when it does, we decide now to not yield to it, to really make the effort to behave differently than we have in the past.
Et donc, il faut également faire apparaître donc cette détermination à de mieux en mieux prendre le contrôle de notre esprit. Donc, ça ne peut pas se faire d'un coup.
So it's a question of training and a question of will. So this is it's something that we need. It's a habit we need to form in ourselves, to be repeatedly observing our thoughts. As much as we can, whether we're walking in the street and think, now, what kind of thoughts am I thinking of now? What's going on in my mind right now? Whenever we have the occasion, the time to take the time to observe our thoughts and to identify them. For example, when we're eating our meal, it'd be good to ask yourselves now what thoughts we're having at the time. So, for example, when we're eating, it could very well be that we feel attached to the food we're eating. And of course, that's just not ideal. We're far better off seeing our food as like medicine, in the sense that we're eating it to ensure our health and our physical well-being. And so it's not because it's really a question of motivation, and it's not because we're attached to the food that we're eating that the food will be tastier.
Je peux poser une question vite fait, Rinpoche? Vous avez dit que vous comprenez
You
pas
said
le mot les émotions.
you don't
Mais
understand the word
à
emotion.
l'Ouest, si je comprends
In the
bien, la
West,
colère, la jalousie,
anger, jealousy,
l'orgueil,
pride,
ce
and
sont
so
des
on,
émotions
they are emotions,
qui
what we call emotions,
produisent beaucoup de souffrance.
which
Et
create
c'est
our
quoi au
problems, our
Tibet?
suffering.
Si on parle de l'orgueil,
Well, when we're talking about
de la
pride and
jalousie,
jealousy
si ce
and
sont
so
pas
forth
les émotions, c'est quoi
in Tibet,
chez vous?
what do you call them in Tibet?
Émotion, c'est le beau mindou, et n'était pas émotion, condo, de chat, dit seul, ouais. Là, t'es des condos, de chat, dit seul, il y a pas baisse.
My main card is. So I have a question now. What about ignorance? Is ignorance an emotion? So it happens in, as Maristella says, that people use the word emotions for all the mental states, and which include things something like ignorance. So that seems to me is a bit of a problem. Of course, we could call maybe pride and so forth emotions, but what about simple not knowing? There's ignorance in the form of mistaken thinking, but then there's ignorance in the form of simply not knowing. Is that an emotion? This is why you have to be careful in Buddhism how to use the word emotion. You could bring the.
On a du mal à rapatrier le micro du côté anglophone qui demande depuis tout à l'heure.
I was anglophone? Oh.
On va partager un petit peu avec nos amis anglophones.
If you bring the microphone up to the English section, it might be nice. Which is insisting.
Good evening. Just I have already arised a lot of questions in my mind from long time. So I will try to ask one question. When we read a spiritual book and when we practice spiritual practicing, and always we gather some knowledge, some wisdom, and we feel that we will implement in our life and like this. So, but when we try to implement in our general life, when we come back in our general life, there is some contradictory with the spiritual word and the spiritual way. So, this is my question that how is it possible to mix the general life with the spiritual practice or spiritual wisdom? How to possible to impose in general life?
생도인지. 아, 네. Tu traduis, il faut que tu traduises la question.
Donc en traduction très libre, comment faire pour équilibrer d'une part la pratique du dharma par rapport aux activités de la vie ordinaire, puisqu'en général, entre l'entraînement à la pratique du dharma, enfin ce qui est recommandé à faire, et ce qu'on fait dans la vie quotidienne,
ce qu'on doit, on est obligé de faire parfois, souvent c'est ça. Ouais, c'est ça, oui.
C'est souvent contradictoire. Donc comment arriver à trouver
résoudre enfin ce problème, oui. It's a very good question, thank you.
C'est une très très bonne question, merci beaucoup de l'avoir posée.
So first of all, we have to just pinpoint exactly what it means to practice the religion, practice the Dharma. What does it actually mean to practice it?
Le sens de l'expression pratiquer, pratiquer une voie spirituelle.
다 주제세하디 공기하던 덤바덤바다 추바피고 대zam기 말았어. 대zam기 세금을 셈을하게 되었어.
So practicing religion is not just meditation, breaking offerings, doing prayers and so forth. These is not practicing religion is not limited to that. These are part of it, but mainly it consists on improving our mind.
가르치고는 고능의 사무지는 철은 로요하래. 최소 송자인데 나 현로 인송을 봐. 최소 송의 책 가르치를 첸디 저걸 배 심발로고들이 송을. 그래서 첸디 짱발로 착을 로죠 봐. 디님은 로이 동출이 추지기원.
So in Buddhism, what we consider to be to qualify as a spiritual practice is something, some action, some thoughts that is concerned primarily with the future lives and thoughts that counteract our attachment to this life. When we are totally involved in the present life alone and totally caught up with worldly matters, then that whatever we do, whether if it's meditation or whatever, it has the shape of is not considered in Buddhism to be a real spiritual practice. Whereas whatever we do is done out of detachment from this life and can turn towards creating happiness in our future lives, then that qualifies as spiritual practice. For example, if we make offerings to higher beings, and for the purpose of that our business goes well, for example, or that we have good luck in the present, or that we won't fall sick, or that our children do well. If the things with the action is supposedly a religious one, but if it's done for a purpose that is a goal that concerns this life alone, it's not considered to be a religious practice. So in Buddhism, when our concerns are directed exclusively towards this life, whatever we do for that purpose of finding well-being just in this life is not considered to be a spiritual practice, even if it has that form. But when we begin to understand that this life is very fleeting, that the matters of this life are relatively unimportant compared to the longer future that awaits us after this life, and that we are behave in ways to just more to ensure ourselves of happiness in this future life, then that is the initial level of spiritual practice according to Buddhism. That's the minimum level, we can say. Beyond that, there's more. When we practice or behave with the purpose of achieving complete freedom from cyclic existence and all its sufferings, that's yet a higher level. And beyond that would be, of course, to practice so as to achieve Buddhahood for the sake of all sentient beings. So when we have a motivation that is to ensure that we are happy in our future life, whatever we may do will qualify as a spiritual practice.
배샤 망부유야 홍침부유야 랑기부유야 세도 저바 뷰네를 가르치는 줄로 말했어. 곰견의 줄로 말했어.
So if whatever we do for this sole purpose of becoming wealthier, more powerful, and more famous, and so forth, if that is our intention, and when making offerings and doing meditation and so forth, well, those actions are not considered, don't qualify as spiritual practices according to Buddhism.
En dépit des apparences.
어두스레 다디슈면 동에다기 샘 개침부증이 쉬어요스 만주 가리는 샘 가르슈리 개심견 대오르 쉬어봐 된리게 계식 샘 대라 제수이랑 신기 내가 야부 제발 먼저 가고 꾸며다 드님배 내가 좀 맛에 빼는 미칠 신다질 야분도나 가리 야부 유인이네 수구 탕탕 내가 야부 파만 빙장 정보 돼서 야부 가리 야부 유비네 뒤통용도 남규 다 미상만 된데 말때 미만 무지 귤 된데 통도 가서 쌤 차도 기기와라 만절 민도 콜도 차도 딘지요 말스 뒤통도 가오 공고 요래 답이야 야부 중시야 콜 딘지도 야부 시다래 하선 쌤 가오 공나 차도 기는 만주 쌤 동이기 그래 가오 공나 만주 쌤 동이기 말이
Now, earlier, I mentioned that I would like to, I wanted to expand a little bit on a few good qualities and that are very beneficial on the immediate and long term. And one that comes to mind is that of rejoicing, feeling glad. Feeling glad about what? Feeling glad about the good actions of others. No. If someone behaves well, is kind to others, can be helpful in them to help them financially, help another person, health-wise or whatever. Whatever good a person does, when we see it, we feel glad that glad that they are doing it, glad for the beneficiary, and that is what we call rejoicing. Another example is feeling glad for what people have. If people have a good job, if people have have a nice family, if they have good friends, if they have a nice house to live in, if they're wealthy, if they're physically attractive, these are things we can feel glad about too. Instead of feeling jealous, because usually what happens when we see others having things that we don't have is we feel jealous, we feel envious, and which is extremely very unpleasant state of mind to be in. It really is extremely unpleasant and upsetting to us to feel this what we call jealous, inability to put up with the idea of good things that other people have. And if instead that we can feel glad for them, then of course we will feel much better. But not only that, we will also increase our good karma extraordinarily. And in a country like this one, Switzerland, we have lots and lots of opportunities to rejoice. The quality of life is very good here. For most people, they have a very good standard of living, and therefore, there's much to feel glad about. To delight in others who are benefiting from these good living conditions.
Et donc, ça serait vraiment quelque chose à mettre en application. Ici, les occasions, non seulement elles ne manquent pas, mais c'est en continu.
되게 너무 인상 너무 통도 교포선 서고 뭔도 친구들 하고 오르바 그 인상 그 뒤들 내가 야본데 제가 그랬다
In Buddhism, there's a good reason for us to encourage this feeling of rejoicing, of feeling glad for the good things that people have or do. It's the context is that of karma, in the sense that if people enjoy these good advantages and or do good actions, it is the result of their past actions. If people tend to do good, it's because they created this habit of doing good in their past lives. If people have good things like nice friends, good entourage, or wealth, it also the effects of their good actions in the past. When we know that these are results of goodness, of virtue accomplished in the past, then that is very much worth being glad about. Now, to give just examples of the actions and their results, now we've mentioned wealth, material prosperity. This is the case of many people. You have you have enough to live on. You're a nice house to live in, and so on. You're clothes to wear. That is, if you have the opportunity to enjoy these, it is as a result of your practice of generosity, of your being generous in the past. Generosity towards others has produced this result. Now, all of everyone here is are human beings, obviously. Again, this is means that you have certain advantages. You can ability to think and ability to accomplish many things. This is Buddhism is considered to be the fact of having a human rebirth. Is considered to be the result of a practice of ethics, basic ethics of abstaining from of stealing, of killing, of sexual misconduct, and so forth. Another trait we can say that is common to pretty well everyone here is that we're all reasonably attractive. Nobody, at least as anyway, is really ugly. We all have a reasonably attractive appearance, and according to Buddhism, this doesn't come about by chance. It is the result of patience. Because we have been patient in the past, that we now can enjoy a attractive appearance. Another example, another result of patience, the practice of patience, is a good circle of friends and family members, for example. If we have good friends, if we good harmonious relationship with our friends and family members, this is also the result of patience. Another result is the ability to complete a task that has been begun, and Most people have a certain degree of ability to carry out your actions until they're complete. For example, your studies, which has allowed you to, for example, to get a job and so on. And this is the result of being enthusiastic, or if you like, joyous perseverance. Another result that most people of you can have now, which is the ability to focus their minds, to concentrate. And for example, when you speak, if you've been able to complete a certain study, it's because you have a certain degree of concentration ability to concentrate. And again, this is a result of having exercised your faculty of concentration in the past. Moreover, the ability to reflect, to understand, and to learn things. In other words, to have a certain intellectual faculties, which is the case, I'm sure, of all of you as well, because you all studied and learned various things and know many things. Well, that also is a result of having used or trained in wisdom in the past, in discernment.
근데 임바 좀데 내가 너는 송요리 공부를 좀 그런지 태어나 송요리 다 롱트라마 어제 집에 롱주 팀기 세벤단데 준비 삼대기 실로 다 롱트라마 어제 또 스트레스.
And it is the Buddha, it taught just the various thing. I remember she's quoted a passage from a commentary of the sutras by Arya Nagarjuna, an Indian master, who explained just that as a result of generosity comes wealth. As a result of ethics, you have a happy rebirth, a good rebirth, and patience brings beauty, and so forth. So this is found in the Precious Garland by Ratnavali, by Nagarjuna. And it's for this reason that when we see others enjoying happy results, wealth, attractive, good circle of friends, and so forth, when we know that this is the consequence of their good actions of the past, their virtuous actions of the past, then there's all the more reason to rejoice, to feel glad for them. So glad for what they accomplished in the past that has led to this result for them. And like I said, when you're out and about and you see all sorts of nice things, if you can take that opportunity to feel glad, to feel good, knowing where that result came from, then you could feel happy all the time. And we're feeling glad all the time. There's absolutely no chance, no opportunity for unhappiness to occur. So now we've almost come to the end of our time together. I'm very glad to have had this opportunity to share with you. And now, if there are things, amongst the many things I've said that you find valid and useful, you please use them. If that's not the case, or other things that you don't agree with, or whatever, that's of course you're free to put them aside. But it's good. It's nevertheless interesting for you to at least a little bit know how Buddhists see things. But in any case, but in any case, I really hope that that you can live your lives as happily as possible and try to be relaxed as possible and not to worry, and try and do your very best to prepare for your future lives, and trying to work on improving by working on improving your minds. Thank you very much. Thank you.